What did you know about autism before your own diagnosis, or before you found out that that was you? What did you know about ADHD? Are you like one of the many other people out there who thinks that ADHD is a young kid running around creating havoc? Well, you might be like everybody else as far as knowledge is concerned, but what this video hopes to uncover is the reality of it for someone like me who's late diagnosed with autism and ADHD. Before my own diagnosis, I struggled with a variety of different things in my life that I thought should be easy. Things that I've come to know as executive dysfunction, things that I've come to know as nervous system dysregulation, stomach issues, and a variety of health problems. All that I am now understanding are related to my neurodivergence and trying to fit into a neurotypical world. So what is it? What's the reality of living as a neurodivergent in a neurotypical world? There's lots of terms in there that we know or that we've come to understand, but maybe our loved ones and our friends and family don't understand any of them. This video is for them, to help them understand you, to help them understand your own journey, and to help them support you and be supportive of you as you learn to unmask and as you learn to navigate now that you know what actually has always been, and that is that you're neurodivergent. You're not someone who has some kind of character defect. You're not lazy. You're not broken. Number one, autism. Growing up, my understanding of autism was a child who didn't cope. I assumed that it was just a sensory thing, that they couldn't deal with loud noises, that they couldn't deal with certain environments, that they needed the safety of their own environment, and that was it. I had no idea about the spectrum of autism. And in fact, I didn't even know that a bunch of my friends were actually autistic. Some of them found out later, some of them knew. But it wasn't until I found out myself and started recognizing the signs in others that I realized what actually was quirks, I guess, was my autistic brain and its need for security, safety, sameness, consistency. Add to that, however, my inattentive ADHD requires completely the opposite. So it's a little bit of a contrast. Someone who has autism and ADHD will often probably appear to someone as being, I don't know, just conflicting. You know, like 1 minute you're okay and the next minute you're not. Or 1 minute you can attend that function and the next minute you absolutely cannot. Those are the things that someone with AuDHD, autism and ADHD, struggle with on the daily. And as someone who is in their world, what you can do is ask them what they need. It's as simple as that. Autistic people will say what they mean. One of the most frustrating things for us is that people who are not autistic don't. And it's really hard because the rules change all the time. So, or there aren't any rules around it. There seems to be this unspoken thing where, you know, you can say one thing and mean something completely different, and that's perfectly okay. But for someone who's autistic, who is quite literal, so, you know, like I've said in previous videos, if you say we're going to the zoo, I think we're going to go and see all the fun animals. Yay, let's go to the zoo. But you might actually be talking about going to work and how crazy and chaotic that is and how many different personalities there are there. And that to you is the zoo. Well, that's weird, but apparently I'm the weird one. Anyway, so just ask them. Ask them what it is that they need from you and help them with that. Provide that for them. Be kind. Be consistent and seek to understand. I think probably one of the hardest things as someone who's neurodivergent, and I've said it before, my kryptonite is being misunderstood. So if you don't understand what's going on, or you're making an assumption that something I've said means something completely different, please ask me. Ask me what I meant by that. Ask me what my understanding of something is. And then let's communicate so that we can understand each other. Because one of the worst things that you can do is assume that I mean something completely different to what I do, get offended, walk away, and then leave me holding the pieces. That happens to neurodivergent people a lot. And, it's one of those things that is very, very difficult for us to handle, but we're used to it. But why should we have to be used to it when all it takes is a little bit of understanding? Number 2, ADHD. Now, the understanding that I had, as I said at the top of the video, is of little young boys running around creating an absolute muck, misbehaving, being absolutely out of control, violent, all of those things. And yes, that happens. But it happens less now because there's more understanding around why they act out like that. And that's only one type of ADHD, and there are 3. So there is the hyperactive type, which is that kind of version, the inattentive type, and a combined type, which is a combination of the 2. Now, my type is inattentive. So the hyperactivity exists in my brain, and my brain is going 100 miles an hour, 100% of the time. It's why I find it very difficult to relax. And in fact, relaxing to me, it's really hard for me to unwind. I need to place myself in particular situations, probably because of the autistic brain, in order to unwind. And if I'm engaged with someone and having a really great conversation and immersed in that conversation, that really helps me to unwind. It really helps me to let go of all of the other sensory input that's happening around me if I'm in a public place, for example. There's a lot of excess energy in the hyperactivity type person who has ADHD. So they need to be moving a lot to get rid of that excess energy. It's why they'll shake their leg when they're sitting. It's why they will grab something and flip it around in their fingers or something. That's called stimming. It's why they need to fidget. It's why they need to get up and get down and walk around when they're on the phone, for example. It's why they need to move a lot, because if they don't get rid of that excess energy, it almost feels like they're burning on the inside. And that is a very, very unpleasant feeling. So allow them that. Don't expect that someone with the hyperactive type ADHD is going to sit down for a long period of time and be comfortable, because they're just not. You need to be able to let them move. Inattentive type, I can sit down and be comfortable and not be stimming and not be shaking my leg, but my mind will do all of that. So my mind will do all the wandering. And if the subject that is being discussed is something that my brain just can't focus on, then my brain will exit the building effectively and it will go somewhere else. I'll still be there, but I won't be engaging, and I probably won't hear anything you said. And that's, for me, the same as, like verbal instructions, like I've shared previously. When you're talking to me and it's not something that I fully understand, I'm not going to get it. It's just going to go in one ear and out the other. I'm not going to hear it. That's just how my brain works. I have to work with how my brain works. So as someone who knows and loves somebody who is neurodivergent, seek to understand them. Ask them what it is they need from you. Ask them how their brain works. What works for them, what doesn't. Now, add to that, those of us who possibly aren't diagnosed yet but suspect it are likely highly masking as well. Masking takes a lot of different forms, and it's developed over time. Since we were kids, we've learned to mask. And we often don't even know what we are masking and what that means. For me, masking was mimicking lots of things. It was finding out in advance what was expected and then providing that. It was learning that through negative experiences that certain things that I did or said weren't acceptable and I needed to change them. So I had to adapt. But adapting basically meant that I was putting on a mask. I was not faking it, but I was camouflaging myself using the masks that are acceptable. So the facade that everyone sees of me when I'm masking is what they expect from me. And I've learnt that that's the case. And so I give that to them. But if I'm being authentic, then you're going to see the true me. And the true me is someone who gets really excited about my hyperfixations, about my special interests, about things that I love, about people that I love. I can get really, really excited about that. And when I'm really excited, I tend to talk faster. I tend to be more animated. My eyes will light up. I'll smile a lot more. I'm being authentic. I'm enjoying my life. So you might not understand the things that I'm talking about, but the fact that you see me like that means that I'm being authentic, and that's a really good thing. So if you want to engage with someone who's neurodivergent and you want to involve them in your life, find out what their special interests are. Find a special interest together, something that lights you both up, and do that. There's lots of different ways that you can engage with someone who's neurodivergent, but the main thing to do is to seek to understand them. And that takes time and it takes conversations. It takes being honest and it takes opening up to them and telling them how you're feeling about it. It might be that, hey, you were always like this and now you're like that. I'm really confused. What's going on? That's an okay question to ask, because then it leaves the door open for me to explain, hey, yeah, well, that was me masking. And what that means is that I wasn't really being true to myself because I didn't feel comfortable sharing me. I thought I would be rejected. So instead, I gave you the version of me that I thought was acceptable. But if you're open to seeing the real me, I'd love to be able to share that with you. One way. Another way is to listen, to be there for them. Ask them how they're doing. Ask them how work is going. Ask them how their relationships are going. Oftentimes, relationships can be very difficult for people who are neurodivergent, only because there's a lot of misunderstanding that happens with that whole not communicating literally thing, and also by the masking, and also by the fact that we can appear to be aloof, we can appear to be angry or upset, and it might just be because we usually have quite animated facial expressions. So whilst we may be silent, our faces will often tell a very good story. And you might have already observed that in your loved one as well, that their face will tell a story and you're like, oh, hang on, they don't look very happy. What's going on there? Just ask them what's going on. The main thing for you to understand is that as a neurotypical person, our neurodivergence doesn't make us less of a person, but we feel like it does. We have always felt like it does. Because what we're doing is we're trying to fit into a world that's not made for us. And we have received so many negative messages over our lifetimes. And usually by the time we get a diagnosis or by the time we suspect that we're neurodivergent, we have heard 10,000 more negative messages than you would have. That's a lot. So just try to understand us, have a conversation with us, and be kind. The autistic experience, for me, has been a journey of discovery. I am over a year now since my diagnosis, and I'm learning more every day. And doing these videos has helped me to understand myself better, and has helped me to come across a variety of other people who are doing the exact same thing. I've found a community of other neurodivergent people who basically experience life the way I always have, because my life up until then was living in isolation effectively, because I thought I was the only one. I knew I couldn't be the only one, but I felt I was the only one. I didn't fit into what I expected was the measure for what I needed to fit into, and I knew I didn't fit it. So I already felt rejected before I went in. So any negative feedback just stabbed me in the heart like you wouldn't believe. And it was really hard. And I felt like a reject. I felt like I just didn't measure up. And no matter how much I looked at why, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure out why I couldn't do things that I thought should be easy. And yet other things that neurotypical people found hard, I breezed through, and I just thought, oh, okay, well, obviously I've got some smarts. And that's because some things I'm great at and some things I'm not. And across our whole experience, neurotypical or neurodivergent, we all have things that we're great at and we all have things that we're not so great at. And that's perfectly fine. That's the human experience. But for a neurodivergent person who has already received so much negativity in their life before they've learned to understand that their brain just works differently, unraveling that has probably been the biggest part of this journey of mine, learning to live life on the spectrum. Learning what my masking has been and how to unmask, learning what to unmask, learning how to be more authentic and true to myself. And in doing that, I've probably learned how to be better with my boundaries as well, with people, with experiences, with my environment. Prior to getting diagnosed, I was really, really good at saying no. I had learnt really good boundaries, and a lot of people who are neurodivergent are not good at that at all. They say yes to everybody because they feel like they have to. And the reason they feel like they have to is because they feel that they will be rejected if they don't say yes. Well, thankfully, I learnt earlier than my diagnosis that saying no was perfectly fine. I learnt that I'm not responsible for how someone responds or reacts to me. I'm only responsible for my own reactions and responses to what happens in my world. I will be kind to everyone around me. That's just my character. And I will be accommodating, and I will always seek to understand. Unfortunately, I haven't received that in return. And yes, that hurts. But part of the reason why I'm doing this video is so that you can understand that the person in your world who's neurodivergent just needs your understanding, just needs a conversation with you, just needs you to be a good friend or a good partner or a good family member. It doesn't take much to understand that just because we think differently doesn't mean that we are at opposite ends and we can't get along. We absolutely can. We just need to understand each other. Think of it like a different culture. I'm Australian. You might be, insert your nationality there. And there will be cultural differences between how you grew up and how I grew up. That's basically the difference between neurotypical and neurodivergent. The way my brain works is just different to yours, but it doesn't mean that we can't adapt. It doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It doesn't mean that we can't get along. And in fact, it does mean that we can, because, whilst I usually introduce my videos by saying, hi, neurospices, because, spicy brain, that's a thing. Hey, variety is the spice of life. And your loved one can learn how to live life on the spectrum the same as I am doing. And if you're the neurodivergent who's watching this, you can do this. Share this with your friends, share this with your family, share this with your colleagues, share this with anyone you think will benefit from seeing it, from hearing it, and from understanding you better, because I want your relationships to be the best they possibly can. If you've stayed here this long, thank you so much. Please hit the like button. It really helps my channel out. And by sharing it, it really helps to spread the word on what it's like to live life on the spectrum. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.